Why are carousels evil? We're back, and Randy still hasn't moved.
Nope. Nope.
You're
I am still living in my small town, rural Pennsylvania flood city.
I meant your
So,
chair. You're still in that chair. You haven't
oh,
moved.
I like this chair. This is really like it's a fairly expensive chair. It's really nice. It's really
Wow,
comfortable.
look at you.
Like,
So
I'm
so
very
you went
happy.
last week by letting the audience know you are moving to a town with a Whole Foods in your neighborhood in your chair.
hmm
It can't just be a nice chair. Randy has to let you know it's an expensive chair. Randy is
Listen,
better than you, and he knows it.
listen, it's not about being better. It's not about anything like that. It's about like the fact that, like, listen, I sit on my ass for my job all day. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I need to make sure that, like, I'm comfortable. I want to make sure that, like, because here's the thing. So before I got this chair, which I've had for the last several years and been very happy with, I went through like about a half a dozen chairs. Like
Wow,
I
there's a real
would,
story behind
yeah,
this chair. I didn't even know what I
yeah,
was unlocking.
yeah. Well, I mean, here's the secret, Broderick. Like, I can talk about anything. So like, I could go on QVC and be like, okay, so here's this number 2 pencil. It comes in this classic gold color with the pink eraser tip. Anyway, so chairs. So I kept trying to like cheap out on chairs. So like I go to Staples and I'd be like, hey, this chair's $75. Great, I'll buy it. It'll be fantastic. Like 6 months into it, man, it was like sitting on like a pile of rocks. It was just be
Mm.
terrible. And I'm like, all right, you know what? Fine. Like, I will up my budget. I will spend $150 on a chair. And like I spent $150 on a chair. And you know what? 6 months comes and goes. And it's like, it's not bad, not bad. 9 months in, turns into a pile of stones again. Just like constantly like terrible. And so after doing this like a number of times, I was just like, okay, listen, I am not spending several $100s every year on a new chair. It's wasteful. It's bad for the environment. Like, it's just terrible. Like, I have to like actually spend real money on a chair. And fortunately, like, I had saved up a bunch of like my professional development expenses. I'm like, I can either go to this really cool conference or I can buy a really nice chair. And
Oh,
so
you
I was
got a
like,
chair. I love
yeah,
that.
well, I mean, here's the thing, like, you have to make these decisions. And I was just like, okay, because I had recently at the time not made an adult decision. Like, this was an adult decision, buying the chair instead of going to a conference. But a couple of weeks prior to that, my wife and I were like, okay, we've set aside money to buy a new refrigerator because our refrigerator was dying and it was old and it was like it sounded like a train. It was like chugga 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 chugga, like making ice and doing its thing. And then we got the chance to get Hamilton tickets, like fourth row in New York City. And we're like, listen, we can either go see Hamilton or we can buy a new refrigerator. And so it took us probably another year and a half before we got that refrigerator, but the Hamilton show was amazing.
Wow.
So, yeah.
You really
So,
can. You have a story on everything. And I love that. I want to get there. I'm not quite there yet, but I can see you have a nice chair. I think I actually have a similar chair, except I worked at, and by the way, having a story, that's not a knock. If you have a story about anything, you should be a podcaster, which is what you're doing. So I'm happy to
absolutely.
be on this show with you and learn more about all of Randy's decisions behind buying furniture and everything else. I know it's really nice. It's actually a luxury for listeners to know as a podcast co-host, I can alley oop just about anything. And Michael Jordan over here is going to have a story to just slam that alley oop home and not just, it's the worst when you're doing a show and you have an interesting point and your co-host's like, yeah, I get you. So yeah,
Cool.
Randy, it's yeah,
Good. Nice.
cool story, bro. Cool story, bro. But with the chairs specifically, do you know who Ryan George is on YouTube?
I do not. Tell me who Ryan George is.
All right. So do you know what the, I guess, the media outlet known as Screen Rant is?
Yes.
Okay. So Screen Rant has a series that features Ryan George. He has his own YouTube channel as well. And they're called pitch meetings. And so in those pitch meetings, like that's what he's really, really popular for. Like it'll be like the Godzilla pitch meeting. And it's between like the executive over at whatever production company made the film and the head writer. And it's usually just tearing it apart, right? It's satirical. It's meant to be
Yes.
funny, but it's him. It goes back and forth. And so he does one on his own channel. He just breaks down everything else. Where it's one of them, he does Amazon reviews, and listeners go check it out. I think it's so funny. In there, he talks about like, okay, some guy's just trying to buy a chair, and what I think is really funny. Back in the '90s, maybe you just gone to like Kmart or something
Hmm.
and just picked up a chair that was near you. Now, almost any buying decision requires us to become some sort of like pseudo expert and do all sorts of research. And so in the video, he's like, all right, I want a good chair. And next thing you know, and it's like he's talking to Amazon. Amazon's like, oh, great. We have the best chairs. Have you ever heard of X Lungar 5000? He's like, never heard of that brand. He's like, oh, what about Palatios? They're like, never heard of any of these brands. And they're like, oh, well, they're the best. He's like, well, why are they the best? Well, look how many 5-star reviews they have. Whoa, 40,000 5-star reviews. That's like amazing, isn't it? Yeah, it's like a little too amazing. Let me go into these
Yeah.
reviews and like let's see let's take a gander and see what people are actually saying about it. All the 5-star reviews look the exact same. I bought this for my husband and he loves it. And all the one he's like, well, that's not very like trustworthy. Let me go ahead and look at the 1-star reviews. Chair sucks. Broke when I jumped on it. And you're what? And so he goes into like the 3.5, 4-star reviews. They're like, yeah, it's a good chair for the price. Maybe it could have been a little bit better about this and that. And its lumbar support's all right, but whatever. And so, yeah, he has to look up what does lumbar support mean. And so you have to learn all these things before just buying a chair. But what's interesting about it now is if you ever go and look at that chair, now he doesn't talk about this in the video, but we know this in marketing. If you go and look at that chair and you decide not to buy it and you leave, you're going to get hit with retargeting ads and other things on Amazon where they now know you are in the market for a chair. And you might go into a social media platform and they'll hit you with a carousel ad that's got a variety of chairs on them. And so today we're going to talk about why these ads are evil. Take me through it. I mean,
Well,
I've never heard that before today, but I saw the title, and just like the audience, I am legitimately curious as to where you're gonna take this today.
so yeah, so I have very strong opinions about carousels, and here's the thing: there are two, in my mind, there are two different kinds of carousels. Okay, like the example that you just listed, like an ad that shows like a list of products, or like for instance, Netflix has a carousel of like shows, where it like shows all of the different like show like artwork, and then you can kind of slide through them. Like those ones where they're showing you content options that you're intended to like flip through like a catalog. Like those kinds of carousels are very serviceable. um i I generally dislike carousels because it hides content, and one of my personal design philosophies is like if you hide something, it doesn't exist, and so like don't hide things. um where carousels become, I think, like evil and problematic is when you have like at the top of a website and you have like, oh, we've got this giant like feature thing, and it automatically advances like within 2 seconds of you landing on the page, and
Mm,
then like if you hang out there, it advances again, and it's a giant hero area that it serves no one's purpose. Like it doesn't work for anyone, and that's why I call it evil. Okay, and I want to break this down for you. So, Broderick, you are a business owner and you have a website, right? Right.
yes.
Yes. And on your website, you have a hero. I went to your website this morning. I'm like, does he have a carousel? Because if he does, I'm gonna
Evil.
I was like, I'm like,
He's
man,
a witch.
I'm gonna get him. But like, you do not weigh the same as a duck. You are not a witch, and so like you have a hero area where you have a very clear call to action, and it's like, hey, you've got a little bit of animation there, which is really nice, but it's very clear and direct as to what you want to communicate. And not everybody, people who have carousels in that spot do not have that clarity of purpose.
Mm.
They're confused. They there's an there are within some institutions, within some businesses, where there are multiple teams and multiple departments, and everybody is clamoring for like the sweetest spot. Okay, like, you know, like at Four Kitchens, like we're a small team, but like, like maybe like we've got like front end engineers and back end engineers and designers and content strategists, and it's like, we're really great if we had that hero area. And so, like, if we didn't have strong leadership, it would be like, hey, we can put a design slide up and we can put a front end engineering slide up. And what we can really do is solve for this lack of internal, like, um, strength of, like, strength of mission, strength of messaging, and break things down. Um, it's it's a case of, sorry, I'm trying not to get too ranty. I'm trying to actually keep it like professional because I really want to use a lot of swear words. It's
Wow.
when like it's when a bunch of departments get together and they clamor and they fight and they're like, I want the front page, I want the front page, I want the front page. And then and the person who's in charge of the website is like, I do not have the authority to tell people no. And you say yes to everybody.
Mhm.
And as a result, like you end up like, hey, everybody gets a slide. And it seems like that solves the problem because then everybody can say they're on the homepage. But there are fundamental problems with users coming to the site for carousels. First of all, they only see the one that's active when they land on the page, and they do not scroll through because no one actually looks at it. There's this thing, Broderick, called banner blindness. Okay. And when you have a banner, people don't look at it. They think like, oh, that's an ad, I'm going to ignore it. And
Mm.
with those giant animated heroes where like there are carousels, people are used to it not having any content that's worth a damn, and they ignore it. In fact,
Mm.
the Norman Nielsen group, or Nielsen Norman, I always get it confused which it is, but they're a famous like usability study
Mhm.
group. They did a study to say like, hey, can you go to this website and find me a discount on washers and dryers? And they show the screenshot in the article, and the screenshot is literally a giant carousel at the top of the page that says giant discount on washers and dryers. And the usability study, like, almost no one found it because
Mm.
everybody ignored it. And so as a result, it created problems. And this thing that is solving an internal issue isn't actually solving a user issue.
Interesting. So I grew up, I don't feel like I see them as often anymore on
Mm-hmm.
websites, but I
People have
remember
been
seeing
learning.
them everywhere in like 2010 to 2012, like that time frame. If we're good, I want to see if I can. Let me see if this will actually work here for me to share my screen. Love to get your thoughts on this. So I'm a big NBA fan, as I know you know. Let's see if this works. Okay. So if you go to NBA.com, without sharing the screen here, let me see, share.
I'm popping on over to NBA.com right now.
Okay. Can you see it
I
on my
see there's a
screen?
carousel. Oh,
Yeah.
oh
So like
no, I
this is
can't.
like an interesting carousel. So right here, it's got the title where you can learn more. It's got a
Mm-hmm.
timer at the bottom to let you know when you're like through. So if I refresh this page here, so you see, look, here's this timer.
Mm-hmm.
It's on free agency. So many seconds. NBA offseason. Now, this is interesting because it's not just in the top, right? In this hero bar, it's just within this box. Um, Moving to Summer League. What do you think about websites like this where maybe you're in media or news, right? Because if I go to ESPN, a different sports outlet where I think probably more people gather, their news and for source news for um And for sports, scores, news, updates, all that stuff, well, they don't have any carousel here. It's more than
Mm-mm.
anything just a bunch of data, scores, and like the most pertinent or top. I mean, I searched articles or topics regarding those articles. And then if I go to like Bleacher Report here, see this one again, it doesn't look like they have a carousel. They have the top headlines.
Yeah.
Actually, I think this one looks the cleanest of any of them. And then they have all sorts of articles underneath. But you can pick and choose, right? I can say, okay, I know this is the top thing they want me to see, but then what are the other top things I need to be looking at? Okay, here's the stuff with going with LeBron. Here's Argentina. Here's something with a Golden State Warriors. Okay, got it. So I don't know. I mean, of all those that we just went through, they're not trying to sell anything. They just want you, like an NBA, for example, like they did of any of those outlets, Bleacher Report, ESPN, and um, NBA.com. They were the only one to use a carousel. But also, they're not really trying to push anything. It's just a bunch of articles. So in their case, is it really evil, or is it just like, do they just have too much content? Should it be laid out differently? Like, what did you think of those three different layouts?
So great question. I'm glad that you asked it. So the last two examples, the Bleacher Report and the what was it, ESPN, those two are obviously more user focused in that what they are doing is they are providing a layout that allows users to navigate and find the information that they want. So the Bleacher Report with the top headlines running down the side,
Mm,
like that allows a user to at a very quickly at a glance understand like what's going on right now with sports, and get a quick overview. It allows them to then dive deeper into the things that they're more interested with. And as you go down the page, there are various sections that may or may not apply to a user, but it's very obvious that, like, this is for me. I'm going to pause and I'm going to read headlines. And this is not for me. I can skip it and continue to scroll because users are very comfortable scrolling. If we go back to the what was the first one? That was the NBA.com with
yeah.
the animated timer. There is there is an anxiety that strikes by having that little timer go
Hmm.
across, where it's like, okay, like I have to react quickly if I actually want to interact with this content,
Mm,
because if I don't, when that timer is done, it's going to move on to the next thing, and I'm not going to be like maybe done reading what I'm reading. And
interesting.
so
Yeah.
like suddenly, like it's like suddenly I have to act. Like I'm on the page right now and I'm looking, and there actually isn't a control for me to stop the timer from
Mm,
moving. Like there is not, like, if I click on now, okay, there's no obvious control. I just clicked on one of the subsections that they
yeah.
have, and when I do that, it pauses the automatic advancement,
Mm,
which is great. But there is no, like, if I didn't actually click on something, I wouldn't know how to pause it, and
yeah.
so that creates anxiety. And I mean, maybe that's what the NBA wants, because like they want to like get your heart rate up a little bit to like when you interact with this. But for me as a user, I'm just like, I want to be able to skim very
Right.
quickly, and I
Hmm.
can't skim on this NBA site with this big carousel. It doesn't allow me to skim what's going on, like the various links and related content that go with each of these, like clicking on summer league.
Mm,
There's like related content like the format summary. There's a video about like 20 years of the summer league, complete coverage of the summer league. That might be content that I'm interested in, but I either have to wait for the carousel to rotate to it, or I have to like specifically click on it and interact with it. And if this was broken out into sections that I could like scroll through, it would provide a better user experience.
yeah.
Like it would let the user interact more. And you know, stuff like this gets built because people want like a large rich feature that they can provide.
Mm,
Um and like this NBA site, they've got like this great photography, and I would want to feature this great photography too. I mean, scrolling down the page, every article has a photograph that goes with it.
hmm.
um except for the like the headlines off to the right. Um, and there are other ways to handle like using this photography and making it interesting. And
Mhm.
I think that the NBA has done a disservice to the people who are coming to that site. You know,
Yeah.
like create sections for it. Like uh, here's a secret: the a page on the internet is not constrained by size. Like you can, if you go to like the
Mhm.
washingtonpost.com, the Washington Post like homepage is super ridiculously long.
Mhm.
Um, and they are constantly like adjusting it based on like news that's coming in and how
Mhm.
important that news is compared to the other news that's coming in.
Mm.
And maybe you know, the NBA doesn't have an editor who's there like adjusting it constantly like the Washington Post does. I think the
Mhm.
Washington Post has one person whose job it is just to continually lay out and relay out the homepage for the Washington Post. But and it's kind of crazy. But if you start to scroll down like a screen length or two, you start getting into sections that aren't modified. They're just having content fed into them and
Mhm.
managed. And it's and those different sections are presented differently and are made to appeal. Like there's like the kind of like the cooking section, there's the politics section, there's like all of these different sections where it's like, okay, I know what resonates with me. I'm going to scroll down the page until I see the section that resonates with me, and I'm going to check that out. Or I'm going to
Sure.
click through to that kind of content. Like, you know, coming back to the NBA, you know, they've got the free agency, NBA offseason, summer league analysis, and Olympics. And it's like, you know, what if they made those like separate sections on the page and then separate sections within the website to help like get people to click through and skim a little bit more.
Mhm.
Um, I just feel like I feel like they could up their engagement by making it easier for people to connect with that content instead of raising their anxiety levels.
Yeah, of the ones we went through, I personally liked the layout of Bleacher Reports the most. It
Mm-hmm.
reminds me kind of YouTube, where you've got the main thing you're watching, that video, there's that big article, and on the right-hand side, you've got the next up videos.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like that layout. There's not as much pressure. It makes sense. It's very intuitive. You're able to show off all that photography. Fun fact, for that reason, you're probably not going to be able to see this because my camera doesn't have a great zoom feature. But for that reason, there's a lot of articles that again, I actually don't even go to NBA.com because I just don't think it's a great experience overall. But, and I also just like writers from different outlets. But I went to last year, I went to a San Antonio Spurs Los Angeles Lakers game with our videographer, Pete. And because of the layout of Bleacher Report and all the great photography, I didn't notice this. But in one of those amazing photos, you're definitely not gonna be able to see this. I'll have to send you the article. It's all blurred right here, but
Yeah.
I highlighted in yellow. There's Pete right between LeBron James and Victor Wembanyama, and I'm like, because they've got great photography, they've got a license with Getty or whatever. There, I was actually able to see all of those, like the headlines, and it was the photo that got me to stop. Now, mind you, I've never seen an article in Bleacher Report where either I or someone I know is in it. That was, warranted stopping. But if it was on NBA.com, there's a really good chance I never would have even seen that article because
Mm-hmm.
I probably would have gone to the website with trying to look up probably something very specific about my team. So in this case, the San Antonio Spurs, and whatever's on the homepage, I'll see that first article and it's irrelevant. And if it is irrelevant to me, I won't even look at any others. So just being able to have something like a thumbnail, like you have on YouTube, like the thumbnail's everything. If you don't have a great thumbnail, people just aren't clicking in. So if you're on NBA.com, I just don't really understand why you have these carousels that create this sense of urgency that maybe give people that feeling of anxiety that make people they don't feel good about being on your website, right? So I don't know. And versus having something like Report where everything's laid out, people can pick their own adventure, see something that looks cool, and I just feel like, and maybe people are different than me, but I feel like if someone sees a really cool edited photo of LeBron, like a YouTube thumbnail, people are more likely to stop and click on that before, instead of just, I'm going to read through headline by headline. Maybe some people are wired that way. I know I see the photos first.
Well, and here's the thing. People skim, and you want to empower that skimming. Like the a website that I think is incredibly skimmable is The Verge's homepage, theverge.com. Okay. Um, they redesigned about, I think, a year and a half ago, and it was really divergent from what they had in the past. And initially, I was not a fan of it, but the more I engaged with it, the more I realized that it was a good model for them,
Mhm.
because it has a lot of like lists that are kind of like called out and made into like their own sections that allow them to like actually kind of like call out what the section is, and then if you want to engage with it or not as you're scrolling down the page. And they
Mm.
have like two columns, so that like when you like skip over one thing, that other column is creating like a bridge to like the next piece of content that you want. See, one of as much as I do not like carousels, one of the things that I always appreciate is when someone asks me for a carousel, because that is an invitation to talking about content and content strategy.
Why you
And
are
it's
wrong.
like, yeah, well, and I have told people straight up, I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'll tell you why,
Against
and then
my
we'll talk about the
religion.
reasons for it. Yeah, it is. It is. If I do a carousel, I will go to hell, and that
Oh,
is
wow.
just that's the way it goes.
That's the
Um,
quote post this week, y'all.
yes,
Do
and of course, here's the thing. I'm of course like being bombastic about it. Like there are some times whenever like if somebody really wants a carousel, I will design a carousel. Um, at any rate. But when people ask for a carousel, I then ask like, well, what is the purpose? What is the problem that is solving for the user? And
Mm.
usually I don't get very good answers to that. I get answers that are like, well, this department wants on the homepage, this department wants on the homepage, and they all have clout, and they all have strong reasons to be there. And I'm like, that's great. Let's talk about now why it's important to have a content strategy for the website, and what is the
Mm.
audience for the website, what is the audience for the page that you want the carousel to land on, and how are you communicating the needs of that person to the user. So like you may have a department that wants to be on the homepage, but in reality, if you looked at the audience breakdown and how the website was structured, it would be more effective for that department to
Yeah.
have a stronger call to action somewhere else. Like for
Mm.
instance, we do a lot of higher education, and admissions and financial aid is very important. Like you really want students to apply to your university or college, but that doesn't mean that you put a big apply button on the homepage.
Yeah.
you know like I wouldn't add like that to the carousel. I would be like, let's put that
Yeah.
in a more
Don't want
appropriate
that to get
place.
lost. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, for me, I don't think all carousels are evil. Like I said in the beginning, I understand why people do it in ads. You want to show a variety of products, and something I'd be really curious to see how other people engage with these, but I love carousel posts, specifically on like LinkedIn or whatever. When right now everyone talks about like video is at the pinnacle of content creation right now. And I get it, right? That makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense. But for me on social media, it's not the thing I engage with the most. A really good, like something we like to do is make these infographics. And the first slide being some headline where it's 61% of people are concerned about inflation in 2025. And I see on LinkedIn, okay, I got to keep swiping right. If it's a minute long video and I just see that, maybe I'll click into it if it's someone I really care about. But more often than not, especially the longer the video, the less I'm likely to actually click in. Um, Whereas if it's something that, and the other thing is too, if it all looks the same, it's a vertical format, all the text just flies in and whatever. It's probably quickly thrown together. Maybe the person's got a great opinion, maybe not. I don't really care to listen to the whole thing. But if it's an infographic, well, I am kind of curious now. Whereas if it's just a singular quote post, maybe I'll read it and move on. But if it's a carousel, it's like, well, okay, why? and maybe there's only 6 slides. So I don't really have to engage the whole thing if I don't want to. It's not like a commitment. I don't have to unmute my speakers. So, regardless of where I am, I can listen to it. Or I guess in this case, read it, not listen to it. And again, if it's designed well, that also makes me more interested to say, okay, this was actually well thought out and put together. I want to see what else they have to say. And so I might go through all the slides. And by that point, I've really thought about that topic because reading it instead of just listening to content, it's helping me kind of just put it together in my own head and formulate an opinion and say, well, I do want to know more. Oh, this came from a podcast. Okay, I'll listen to the rest of this episode. Whoever this person is, I'm curious to learn more. So I really, really enjoy those and putting those together, but also just receiving them. I think that for me, if there's any type of social media post I would engage with the most, it would be exactly that, those carousel infographic posts.
Yeah, I have two things I want to say about that. First, those LinkedIn carousel posts, they that is putting you in charge of your content experience, because you can choose to engage with it,
Mm,
and you can choose to go through it. Like, it is those carousels. The second thing I want to say is that it is a single piece of content that has its experience across a carousel. And so, because you are in charge of your own experience, you are preferring you are able to control that. Going back to our, like, the NBA example that we looked at earlier, you're not in charge of that. Like, it is user hostile. What you're talking about on LinkedIn, you are 100% in charge. Like, there are videos. Maybe you don't want to deal with videos. You want to read something and engage with something to dive deeper into it. I feel the same way. Like, somebody posts a video, like, there are people I follow on LinkedIn who I adore what their ideas and what they do. And I'm just like, I'm not watching a 2-minute video that you posted, because I'm like, I want to read something, because I can
yeah.
choose, like, to disengage from reading much quicker, and I absorb it faster.
Yep.
The What you are talking about with the LinkedIn carousels is that is a form of storytelling.
Hmm.
And to me, that is different than, like, the quote evil carousels that we've been talking about.
Hmm.
Like, those carousels are like, just like, each a distinct thought that they're trying to, like, cram down your throat. Whereas with LinkedIn, it is a storytelling medium. Like, Broderick,
Yeah.
I don't think we've mentioned on the show, but, like, I have a degree in visual communications, focusing in cartooning, because I wanted to write and draw comic books whenever I was a teenager. And so,
Mm,
like, this idea of, like, progressive narratives, like LinkedIn carousels, is something that, like, I think I've got to add it to our list of, like, ideas to talk about, because I think that that is a successful storytelling, like, tool.
yeah. I I couldn't agree more. And that's why I brought it up. But I mean, if I started and I was scrolling on YouTube, or I mean, because you can do them on YouTube now too, or LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and I see a quote, right? And if it's just a standard quote post like people traditionally have done with a podcast, and it said, if I use a carousel, I'll go to hell. And that was the only image. I'd be like, all right, whoever Randy is, that's interesting. Maybe I'll read the description, but there's a good chance I'm probably just going to keep moving. But if I know there's more content, like you said, there's that story in my head, it's kind of like that mindset of, well, I don't need to go through all 6 or 7 slides, but I'll just look at the next one. Okay, I really quickly like digested that content. Okay, I'll do the next one, the next one, the next one. Okay, this was funny. I want to see the rest of this. Like, where is this podcast? So maybe we shouldn't say all carousels are evil, but there is that one black sheep of the family, and it's gone astray. And everyone's like, yeah, that's Nick. That's Jonah. That's Charlie. That's Ashley, whatever. And everyone's like, we love them, but they kind of just do their own thing and beat to their own drum. And that's a website carousels here.
Yeah, I think, the reality is that it boils down to, like, is what you're doing serving the users, or is
Mm,
it serving yourself?
yeah.
And if it's not in service of the user, then you have a problem. And,
That
like,
is like there's no there no, no,
yeah,
that's it. That's it.
yeah.
That's it. That is the end of
Yeah.
this episode. We cannot
Mhm.
close it any better than that. If it is not in service of your user, you have a problem. And your name is Houston. That's it. I
Yep.
got nothing else to say. You know, we should form, like, we have a LinkedIn group, but we realized a lot of our audience isn't on LinkedIn. Randy, we should start a Discord so people can
I'm
just go
game
there
for
after
that.
this and just chat with us. Like, that would be way cooler and way less call to action-y than anything else. So we probably don't have a Discord yet, guys, because because we just don't have one yet. But I think we'll have one sooner or later.
I
So
think,
just
I
keep
mean,
joining. Join
it's,
live.
yeah, it would be great. I would love to talk to more people.
Join other if we can't though, join these live sessions every Friday. Just go to the YouTube channel, Four Kitchens, and you'll find fourkitchens.com. More about design good company. Join the chat. It's a lot of fun. At least we have a lot of fun. Maybe you don't have a lot of fun, but if you have even a semi good time, join the chat. And sooner or later, I'll have a Discord, and you'll be the first to know about it because you were here live. But that's it. See y'all again next week for another episode of Design Good Company.